Welcome to News in Focus with your host, Chris Long, President of the Ohio Christian Alliance. Stay tuned for an analysis and conversation about the issues that matter most to you and your family. Here now with this week's edition of News in Focus is Chris Long.
And good afternoon and welcome to this edition of News in Focus. We're glad that you've joined us. We have a special program for you today as we're going to have a roundtable discussion on the comeback of coal. Those of you that have been listening to this program over the last several years know that we've had roundtable discussions on the war on coal that the previous administration, the Obama administration, had waged on the coal industry in this country, on miners and coal interest, and how that was having a really terrible effect throughout our economy. But with the Trump administration, there's been a turnaround, and the tide has turned, and we're going to talk about as to what the progress is on the comeback of coal. But first, a special program note, of course, today was the funeral of former President George Bush, Bush 41, who was laid to rest today, and there was a wonderful service for him at the National Cathedral. Dignitaries came in from around the country and around the world to pay respects to the former president, who was a U.S. Navy veteran, a former vice president, and, of course, the 41st president of these United States. His family was on hand. Bush 43, his son, gave a wonderful eulogy. We'll have that up on our website, and you want to have an opportunity, if you were working during the ceremony, to be able to review the funeral service, because it will be well worth your time. With us on the phone, of course, is Mr. Bob Murray. He is the chairman and president and CEO of Murray Energy. And Jim Martin, who's chairman of the 60 Plus Association, a national seniors advocacy organization in which the Ohio Christian Alliance has partnered with on policy issues over the years. And gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Chris.
Well, Mr. Murray, I want to get to you first, and that is obviously things have changed during the Trump. We're now into concluding the second year of the Trump administration. Course has changed, but there's still a lot of ill effect from the 8 years under Barack Hussein Obama, his presidency, and his war on coal that he had pledged to conduct. And unfortunately, he was successful in waging a terrible war on the coal industry in this country, affecting many people in the Midwest, from Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky, and other parts around the country. Had an ill effect on the economies of many communities and, of course, on the industry itself. One thing that really struck me, Mr. Murray, a few weeks ago when the Cleveland Browns were playing the Cincinnati Bengals on Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati, the television cameras spanned the river during the break, which showed coal barges moving down the Ohio River, a sight that we had not seen too much during the Obama years, but coal was on the move again on the Ohio River. How is the coal industry doing, and are the President Trump's policies, helping?
Under Barack Hussein Obama, 631 coal-fired power plant units were closed. Now, under Mr. Trump, still there's 44 more units to be closed this year. Indeed, there'll be 117 closed by now in 2014. That's the schedule we're on right now. Now, let me put this into perspective for your listeners. Electricity from coal costs 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Electricity from a natural gas power plant is 15 cents a kilowatt hour. And electricity from a windmill and a solar panel is 26 cents a kilowatt hour. Coal costs 1/4 the cost of a natural gas-fired electricity generation, and 1/7 the cost of windmills and solar panel generation. And that is very important to folks on fixed incomes who have worked all their lives and are living off of their nest egg. They're paying out 31% of what they take in for gasoline and electricity. That mother on a fixed income. So your listeners need to understand the importance of keeping coal in the electricity mix and how it's generated to keep the cost of electricity down. But more importantly, you can't store the sunshine at a power plant. You can't store the wind at a power plant.
That's right.
You can't even store natural gas. It comes in a pipe, and that pipe has a finite diameter, so you can't store it there. The only thing you could store when cold snaps come are nuclear power and coal-fired generation. But it's being closed out at an alarming rate. And we've been trying to deal with all of these closures and more yet to come. The electric utilities themselves, I know of one utility that really supports coal. The others want to be politically correct and are moving to the high-cost way of generating electricity. But we're going to have a very bad problem coming, and that's the reliability of the grid without this coal.
Well, that's what the president wanted to address with his energy secretary, former Texas Governor Rick Perry, who was selected for the post of energy secretary. And if you're just tuning in, we're talking with Bob Murray of Murray Energy. We're also talking with Jim Martin, chairman of the 60 Plus Association. We're discussing the comeback of coal in the Trump era as President Trump promised the coal miners that he would put them back to work and he would end this war on coal that the previous administration conducted against the coal industry, which affected the states of West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Kentucky, and others. America's energy needs the reliability of a national grid. This is what Mr. Perry talked about in his statement early in the year. Mr. Murray, we've seen a flurry of activity earlier this year when Rick Perry made the announcement and he rolled out his plan. There were counter moves by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, known as FERC, and also the political posturing of PJM, which is the grid operator. We seem to be in somewhat of a holding pattern right now after the leading up to the election, after the election. What's happening right now, and what do you anticipate the administration to be doing in the new year to help break through this impasse?
Chris, your observation that we're in a holding pattern is correct. We are in a dangerous holding pattern. FERC is feckless. It has not functioned. It talks. Even the employees that President Trump has put on there have talked, done nothing. The power grids that buy the power from the power plants and deliver it to the homes and to the factories recognize, and I was in a meeting in Washington last week on this, 2.5 days, where they all recognize that we have a problem in the future. My argument is that the future is now. We've passed the future. We've closed one coal-fired power plant too many already.
Yes.
Somewhere.
Yep.
And that future is history. And it's a dangerous situation. Let me explain. We had one cold snap last winter, with this winter approaching. From December 27th to January 8th, we had what they called the bomb cyclone. The winds were so fast that the windmills contributed zero to the power grid. It was cloudy. The solar panels contributed nothing. Gas contributed nothing because the pipelines feeding the gas-fired power plants froze up. And what gas was available was used for home heating. Zero contribution at that time when there was a huge demand for electricity. Indeed, 22 people died in this 10 days, directly related to this cold snap. Electricity prices went up from $28 to $200 a kilowatt hour in the eastern PJM interconnection, which is eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York. It went up in that area. It went up from $26 to $200 a kilowatt hour.
Wow.
Coal provided 84% of the electricity during that 10 days, kept the lights on, and kept the grid running. Otherwise, we would have had a total grid collapse.
And that coal generation, that's right, and that coal generation came from the Ohio Valley. I mean, these are the coal plants that are scheduled to close in the next few years. First Energy Solutions that went bankrupt. Of course, they with you, Mr. Murray, went through the long attrition of Obama's war on coal, and they had to file for bankruptcy. Those plants are scheduled for closure. They seem to kick back the date a little bit as to both their nuke plants in Ohio and the coal plants in Ohio. And I'm telling you, that makes us, first of all, the economy in Ohio, that makes us concerned. The administration is concerned. But, I want to go back to what you talked about, the cold snap last year, which was the bomb cyclone, according to the Weather Channel. 22 people died. That's not well publicized. Those are elderly. This is with us still providing the energy. Jim Martin, you've stated all along that Obama's war on coal was a war on seniors because it ultimately raised utilities bills for those on fixed incomes. What are you hearing from the administration, and what's your thoughts on all this, Jim Martin?
Well, let me just say this. I follow Bob Murray's lead on this issue, quite frankly, because I'm the son of a coal miner. I grew up in eastern Kentucky. I have relatives from Hazard, Kentucky, where I was born, all the way over to Bowling Green and Paducah. I've got relatives all over Kentucky. My father was a coal miner. It's an industry that, whether it's coal, nuclear, wind, solar, biomass, you name it, but what is the most reliable energy that we have is coal. And the war on coal was stopped momentarily, really, by the election of President Trump, but there's still no assault on coal because of all of those still left over, the Obama holdovers, if you will,
yes,
and others who keep spreading misinformation about what's going on. Let me just point this: last Friday, Black Friday, the government issued a report, an ominous report about the economy, based around climate change. But President Trump, came back and correctly noted that the air quality here in our country right now is the cleanest it's been in modern history. And the problem, you see, is that Asian countries, China in particular, with their disregard for the environment, we are reaping that. It's coming in on the West Coast, and it's causing problems in our country. Air pollution in our country is caused by China and other countries because they do not adhere to the environmental regulations that we operate under here. And just one other point I'd make right now. Coal and the grid, and it is a national security issue. Everybody says it's an economic issue. Listen, it's a national security issue. If we can't operate our military bases because of an attack on the grid, then we're all in deep trouble. Let me point out, I was reading something about Winston Churchill recently, and Churchill said famously that that democracy is the worst form of government except for all others. Well, these naysayers like to say that coal is the worst form of energy, except when you need it. That's where I'm going with that.
Well,
we need coal, and quite frankly, the war on coal is still going on.
Well, that's right. And here's what Energy Secretary Rick Perry said along those lines about the power plan that the Energy Department had under the Trump administration. He says these retiring coal plants are at an alarming rate that, if unchecked, will threaten our ability to recover from intentional attacks and natural disasters. The president is right to view grid reliance as a serious national security issue, Perry said at a conference call on cybersecurity. So these are the kinds of challenges we're having. I mean, the national electric grid is national security. Mr. Murray.
Yes.
Yes, it is. It certainly is. And the president gets it. Donald Trump gets it relative to the need for reliable, low-cost electricity in America. For folks on fixed incomes, paying out 31% of what they have for electricity and gasoline is an outrage. We don't have a climate change problem in this country. That's a hoax. That's a political platform by alarmists from Al Gore to virtually every Democrat that I know. Use it as a political platform. It isn't happening. But what we do have is an energy poverty problem. And when you take coal out of the equation, you've just gone from 4 cents a kilowatt hour electricity to 26 cents a kilowatt hour electricity, and the grid becomes more reliable because these new renewable energies are not available if the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. We're getting into a huge national security problem. The president's been trying to deal with it. He's done a number of things very right. But as you said earlier, the job is far from done yet. And people need to wake up and frankly quit voting for Democrats because it's becoming a very unreliable power grid. And the operators, whether it's PJM Interconnection or MISO, Admitted America Independent System Operator, any of these names, they all recognize they've got a problem, and they need to be finding a way through capacity payments or some other way to keep both nuclear power and coal-fired plants in existence. But it's not happening. As I said earlier, there are 44 plants to be closed this year and 117 by the schedules that by 2024 under the schedule that utilities have planned and announced. So the president gets it. He knows it's a major problem. I told Mike DeWine that one of the biggest problems he's going to have as governor of Ohio is that there are going to be 100,000 jobs lost in the Ohio Valley from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati in the power plant operatings, in the jobs, in the coal mines, and it's going to spread now when this reliable electricity, low-cost electricity is gone to make lives for all of us. That's an immediate problem. If you don't believe that, electricity costs in California right now, where they've gone this route, are 3 times more expensive than the rest of the United States, and their grid is not reliable. So the president gets it. He's made a lot of progress, but there's a lot more needs to be done.
Well, FERC is supposed to be, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is supposed to be somewhat of a committee to oversee the balance of the energy sources of gas, of nuclear, of coal, traditionally, of course, now with renewables, wind and solar. And Jim Martin, wind and solar under the Obama administration were receiving lots of subsidies from the federal and state governments. Those subsidies still are in place. They're being subsidized to actually continue to fight against coal. Coal's at a disadvantage because, and who's paying for that? Well, the taxpayer's paying for that. And, even in our utility bills, I'm told that my utility bill, there's still a portion of that that's going to pay for these renewable mandates. The state legislature in Ohio does have a bill, House Bill 114, that would roll back or eliminate those mandates. It passed the House, it's in the Senate, and they're in a lame duck session, and whether they're going to get to it or not remains to be seen, unfortunately, or if a compromise bill would be coming forward. On the federal level, I know the administration has done what it can, but, this isn't really a fair playing field for all the energy companies, sources coming into the power grid and providing services. Coal has been standing alone in this, and then been doing it. Mr. Murray's been doing a stellar job. We're going to get to that because I want to reference this Bloomberg report from August that talks about his administration of his company, and I think it's admirable, and we need more of leadership like that in companies and industry in America to be a good example for people. But Jim, your thoughts on that, on these mandates that we're paying for?
Well, for sure, and as Bob Murray just mentioned a minute ago, those on fixed incomes, obviously senior citizens. And by the way, we have about 300,000 seniors in Ohio and about 190,000 in my home state of Kentucky. And these seniors are getting hammered with energy prices. And about 70% of them rely on their own fixed incomes for their utilities, their food costs, you name it. But again, going back, what the Democrats are doing now, besides Obama and Hillary Clinton, and even Michael Bloomberg, who may run for president, the former mayor of the city of New York City, the mayor, he's already come out and said we're going to close down coal plants.
Oh boy!
Again, if you their hatred of coal and coal miners, if you will, if you deviate one little bit from their mantra, they'll say, well, you're a climate denier. They hide behind climate change. for crying out loud. We ought to know better. And FERC, you mentioned them all. They all ought to be fired right now. Neil Chatterley, the chairman, and McIntyre, and all these guys, they voted unanimously to oppose President Trump's plan, Rick Perry's plan, I guess it's Department of Energy, to rely on nuclear energy and coal. And
right.
What can be cleaner than nuclear energy, for crying out loud? But they all hide behind one accident many, many years ago to say that it's unsafe. It's a war of words here, and unfortunately the media is controlled by the liberals, and of course they preach the Obama line about coal being. And again, I go back to democracy is the worst form of government except for all others. Coal, these guys say that's the worst form of energy, except when you need it. Mm-hmm. Of course, it's not the worst form. It is, in my estimation, the cleanest and most reliable, most resilient, and most affordable for those on fixed incomes. And again, and the grid. And don't get me started on that again. As a former Marine, you got to look at the implications of something happening to the grid.
Yes.
That means our military bases, the operations, et cetera, sure, the economy, but the military would be brought to a standstill.
Well, back to what you said, Mr. Murray, about talking to incoming Governor Mike DeWine, who will be sworn in a few weeks in January. He'll be sworn in as our next governor in Ohio, and Ohio is ground zero for this. Mike Cope, president of the Ohio Coal Association, was quoted in this Columbus Dispatch article. He says, "We aren't sure exactly how it will be implemented." He's talking about the Perry plan. "It is very positive for the industry. We're very concerned about the premature closing of coal-powered plants. There is a strong feeling that is going to come back and bite us." Cope said, "The reduction in the number of coal-fired plants raises the risk for higher electricity rates because of transmission costs. Closed plants means electricity will have to travel from farther sources to make for their lost generation," he said. "The more of these that close, the more pressure there will be on the grid," he said. And of course, Jim, translating that will mean higher costs for the consumer and those on fixed income, seniors and families. That's a problem.
Absolutely. And again, Bob Murray is the last man standing. All these other coal companies, they caved in. They went bankrupt thanks to Mr. Obama and Hillary Clinton. So Bob Murray is the last guy standing. Thank goodness he's still there. And I noticed that you're also beginning to export coal. Why? Because guess what? China, India, these countries are building coal plants just as fast as they can. Why? Because it provides reliable, low-cost electricity for their constituencies.
We just have about a minute left in this segment. Mr. Murray, your thoughts?
All right, to follow up on what Jim just said, we'll export 30 million tons of the 76 million tons coal that we'll mine this year to the rest of the world. They're building coal-fired power plants all over the world as they're being closed in the United States. They recognize, as Obama administration's director of EPA said, if you could close all the coal-fired plants in the country, it would have an immeasurable effect on climate change or the environment. And then they described and quantified immeasurable by saying 0.02 degrees Fahrenheit. That is immeasurable. It's all for nothing. What we have is an energy poverty problem because these electric rates are going completely out of sight.
Okay.
And they don't need to.
Mr. Murray, thank you. And hold on, because we're going to have you on the other side of the break. We're talking with Bob Murray of Murray Energy and Jim Martin of the 60 Plus Association. We'll be continuing our discussion on the other side of the break. Stay right there. Don't go away.
Who's looking out for seniors today? It's not the AARP. AARP worked overtime to help pass Obamacare, the legislation that cut over $700 billion from Medicare. And AARP supports the death tax, which can rob families of over half their savings due to the death of a loved one. Seniors know that AARP would rather make millions peddling insurance products than support the policies that actually help America's elderly. That's why America's seniors count on the 60 Plus Association. For more than 20 years, 60 Plus has been fighting for the seniors that AARP has left behind. 60 Plus Plus fought against Obamacare and continues to fight every day for its repeal in Washington. And 60 Plus is the leading national organization working to repeal the death tax once and for all, so that families can pass down their businesses and farms to the next generation, not the IRS. Stand up for your values. Join 60 Plus today. Visit 60plus.org or call 703-807-2070. This message paid for and authorized by the 60 Plus Association.
I'm Johnette Cruz, and I'm a busy mom. Then a friend told me about TrustBlueReview.com, a new website powered by the Christian Blue Network. She uses it to find trusted Christian-owned businesses. I checked it out, read the helpful reviews, and found a great family dentist. Now I use Trust Blue Review for all my family's needs. For peace of mind, do what I did. Visit TrustBlueReview.com or download their free mobile app from your app store today.
The trusted source for all you do. Trust Blue Review.
Will my kids like this dentist? Can I trust this mechanic? Who's a good choice for my upcoming remodel? I found businesses I can trust from TrustBlueReview.com.
This company rebuilt our deck and renovated our bathroom. I'd highly recommend them to anyone looking to hire an honest contractor.
The best dentist experience I've ever had.
It's now easy to find trusted businesses in my community that have the same Christian values as my family. It all starts at TrustBlueReview.com or download their app in the App Store today.
The trusted source for all you do. Trust Blue Review.
And we're back with our panel discussion on the comeback of coal. And with us on the phone is Mr. Bob Murray, Chairman and President and CEO of Murray Energy, and also Jim Martin, Chairman of the 60 Plus Association, a national seniors advocacy organization. Gentlemen, welcome back to this segment.
Yes. Thank you, Chris.
Well, Mr. Murray, there was an article that I read this morning, and I was looking up because, finding recent articles pertaining to the coal issue and, of course, to your company as well. And I found this article from Bloomberg from August 23rd, and it's titled, Murray Energy Dusts Itself Off After a Brush with Insolvency. And as I went on to read the article, I actually was just welled with pride, sir, the way that you conducted your business in a way in which I think is admirable and is an example of how we ought to point young people as to how private industry ought to operate and be responsible. And Jim, you said it earlier in the first segment about how where other coal companies didn't do the right thing, they discharged their pension plans, they went bankrupt, they didn't think of their employees. Mr. Murray's done just the opposite. He's constantly thinking about his employees. He's thinking about the people that the coal industry, when it's running into a rough patch, how it's going to affect those families. And he really is an example of what we ought to be pointing young people to who are thinking about going into industry because, Mr. Murray, you are an example. I'm reading here from the article. It says, back in March, prices on some of the Murray Energy Corp's junior bonds descended to levels that resemble some of the company's deepest coal mines. Today, it said, helped along by strong coal prices and a campaign by Murray to buy back its own debt at deep discounts, those notes have now more than doubled and rank as this year's best performer among distressed bonds. The industry is still losing customers amid stiff competition from cheap, cleaner burning natural gas, it says, and renewable energy. Nevertheless, Murray says it's gaining ground based on strong export prices for coal mines in Colombia operations and low operating costs in Kentucky. It goes on to say that it allows us to generate some fairly significant cash and utilize and retire our junior debt. And it shows how you've taken the bull by the horns. You led this company back even after the war on coal, and you're the one who took on the debt and just and addressing that debt with the company and putting it on good, solid foundation going forward. You're tirelessly working every day. I mean, your work ethic is admirable, and it's an honor to know you, sir. And it actually, I'm blessed to have come in acquaintance with you over the years, and to be able to point to Murray Energy as an example of industry of how it needs to run. I think the president feels the same way about you, Mr. Murray. Jim, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, thank goodness for Bob Murray. We'd have no. I mean, the cost for seniors would just totally be out of sight. But let me just add this thought about clean coal innovation. innovation is the key to the future of coal and many other jobs, as Bob points out, that are related to coal. But talking about how to innovate our way to the future with clean coal technologies instead of all the fear-mongering that goes on is the way of the future. And nobody's leading that fight more than Bob Murray on coal innovation.
That's right.
But, the claim that air and water is getting dirtier under the Trump administration,
no,
not true. I think I referred earlier to the WHO, the World Health Organization.
Yes.
They just put out a report that the air pollution in the United States is 5 times lower than the global average and 7 times lower than in China. And speaking of China, clearly the west coast of our country, for example, nearly half of the gains that we've made in reducing the ozone in our country, nearly half of these gains have been wiped out because of why? Because of pollution coming from China. So that's the problem we have on our hands. China and other countries, thankfully, they're building coal plants, as Mr. Murray said, as rapidly as they can because coal is reliable. That's the future. But one other thing, let me point out, too, I work on Capitol Hill almost every day. I go to the House and Senate side, and while the House is problematic right now, having gone over to the Democrats, the Senate, quite frankly, has gotten a little bit better, going from 52 to 48 to 53-47. But you got Marsha Blackburn now down in Tennessee. She's replaced Bob Corker. She can be relied on to not just be a knee-jerk reaction.
Yes.
To trying to do in the coal industry. Rick Scott down in Florida, where I grew up, he replaced Bill Nelson. Now they're talking about the environment in Florida, but Rick Scott, he's a problem solver, if you will. Mike Braun, by the way, in Indiana, and by the way, Pat Boone and I did millions of phone calls for Marsha Blackburn, for Rick Scott, for Mike Braun in Indiana. He replaces Joe Donnelly. Indiana's a big coal state, obviously. Now in Montana, John Tester survived, but quite frankly, there's a lot of coal out there in Montana, just like Joe Manchin in West Virginia. He survived, but he's from a coal state. But again, Pat Boone made an awful lot of phone calls for these candidates, House and Senate. So the Senate is looking a little bit better for trying to get things done. I think we got to get rid of everybody at FERC, and I'm talking about the chairman over there, Neil Chatterley, and I can't remember all the other names, Glick and another guy, McIntyre, who the Liberals just honored the guy. All these guys voted unanimously against the Trump plan to revive the coal industry and nuclear power. They should all have to go.
Well, we're going to get to that in a minute about FERC, and there's an appointment pending. But about this article, Mr. Murray, you obviously reinvested in Murray Energy by $30 million in paying down this the junior debt in the company and putting it on better, solid ground. I mean, that is just a stand-up. As you said, Jim, a man, last man standing. Here's a stand-up guy doing the kind of things that, President Trump looks and admires, and I think that's why he wants to help the industry. Mr. Murray.
I've been an expert on the electric power grid for decades. This is my 67th year in the coal business. I'm in West Kentucky right now among my miners today doing this call. I'm a very blessed man. My company was built by my Lord Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Not by me. And there were 52 bankrupt coal companies in 2016. There were only 4 of us, major companies, that were not bankrupt. We barely got through it. It was by the actions of my Lord Jesus Christ. But I didn't try to dump my liabilities on somebody else, and I didn't dump my debt on my creditors. It's not been easy because these streamlined coal companies have now come out of bankruptcy, and I have to compete with them every day. They're all streamlined. Debt's gone. Employee-related liabilities, they try to dump them on me, and they did, a lot of them. People never work for me. But we have to compete with them every day, and it's quite hard, and it's very difficult to stay solvent because there are 44 more plants to be closed this year. It's still happening. Mr. Trump has not been able to stop them all. I want to tell you one thing, though, that is never said on this program about electricity that your listeners need to know.
Yes.
The public utility commissions of the respective states, some states are known as public service commissions, some states are known by public utility commission. An electric utility makes money if it spends money. And when they invest in a gas plant or a windmill or a solar panel, the rules in those states are that they make more money. So they're incented to close coal-fired plants. They don't spend any money on coal-fired plants. The rules are all upside down. And that benefits the shareholder and benefits the utility, but it does not benefit the guy paying the bill for the electricity. And people need to understand that. There not only has to be reformation in Washington at FERC by the Trump administration and what they can do, but within the states themselves, these electric utility commissions, such as in Ohio, Public Utility Commission, needs to be turned upside down. So, is the case in West Virginia and every other state I know, because the more money an investor-owned electric utility spends, the more money they're allowed to charge to you people that are struggling to pay your electric bill.
Yes.
People need to understand that. It's all stacked wrong. And frankly, it's not told enough. And to get to where we have the lowest cost electricity and the most reliable electric power grids that we can have. So that's probably not well received by some of my customers, but it is factual.
We're talking with Bob Murray, Chairman and President of CEO of Murray Energy, and Jim Martin of the 60 Plus Association, a national seniors advocacy organization, and we are talking about the price of the electric bill that you pay at your home, families and seniors, and how this is going to affect you and your bottom line, and that single mom who's trying to really make things work. And so this is why we're discussing this today. Mr. Murray, the FERC, the National Committee of Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, this is a political entity. These are appointments. Jim, you talked about how there's liberals. They're running against the interest of the president's agenda. Even his director of the Department of Energy, Rick Perry, they turned back that plan. What's on this schedule as far as making some replacements there on the FERC committee, Mr. Murray?
Unfortunately, Mr. Trump has made them, and they've turned out to be another duelist, feckless bureaucracy that talks a lot, just like the politicians do, and particularly the Democrats.
Yes.
And about what they're going to do, but turn out to do nothing positive to make more reliable electricity in America and to get the cost of electricity down. They're feckless, they talk, they're almost not worth paying attention to. And these are Trump appointees. He has to have 2 Democrats on there, but he's got 3 Republicans. One is up nominated right now to be put on there. There are 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. One Republican already resigned already, and it was good because he was against low-cost electricity and coal. And they talk. They don't do anything. They don't get the job done. That's what we have too much of in government. This president recognizes that. Obama bred it. Obama wanted the government to be big and to do nothing. And that's what the Democrats want. It's really hard because here I am out here in West Kentucky. They're working as hard as I can to try to keep these operations going. And I've got a government that really is doing nothing or doing the opposite things of what should be done. You mentioned Bloomberg. He made $87 million this year. And he's the biggest contributor to the Beyond Coal campaign of the Sierra Club. I wouldn't give a dime to the Sierra Club.
Right.
Because they're the ones that are more than any other entity in this country, and I'll be quoted on this, as, pat them on the back, give more money. Murray himself said that you're against low-cost, reliable electricity, and they are. But the biggest contributor to their Beyond Coal campaign, which is what they call it, is Bloomberg.
Well, this is just it. This is all the enemies of the war on coal had many allies against the coal industry, Jim Martin, and we even see like the so-called renewables of wind and solar. They're borrowing against the future. They're trying to saturate the market. They're being underwritten by government subsidies. When is that going to come to an end? When do we have to stop footing the bill from this experiment, Jim?
Well, we have to keep following Bob Murray's lead and others here on Capitol Hill, some friends who you have. Let me just comment, though, about FERC. Again, they've been fiddling while Rome burns, if you will, and the Sierra Club and Beyond Coal by Bloomberg. And I've testified against the Sierra Club. I go to some of these meetings. I went up to New Jersey a couple of years ago. Sierra Club was there with about 15 of their employees. It was just me and one other part-time assistant who drove me up there. But I testified against the Sierra Club and what they were talking about before one of the public utility commissions that Bob referred to earlier. I've testified down in Florida, Georgia, Alabama before these utility commissions. But again, going back to FERC, it's Neil Chatterley, LaFleur, Mr. Glick, Mr. McIntyre. I think Bernard McNamee is the one that's probably just left the commission. But, somebody said to me the other day, well, Jim, there's 2 and 2. We need that third Republican in there, so it's 3-2. I said, hey, the 2 Republicans voted against the Trump plan, if you will. So what we need to do is recall Bob Murray's plan to the president earlier this year, or at the beginning, I guess, last year, to make a place for coal and nuclear so that you could have reliable energy moving forward. And again, Rick Perry, to his credit, carried forth with that plan. He's been an ally there, but again, the FERC voted unanimously, even the 2 Republicans, against the Trump administration. So it's not over with yet.
Right, and one of the principles in that plan that Rick Perry put forward was for coal plants that are part of the electric grid, supplying energy to the electric grid, is to have enough supply on hand in the event of a national emergency or shipping distribution challenges to those plants. We know that when you had the polar vortex in 2014, the Ohio River froze. You couldn't get coal shipments down by barge on the Ohio River. That was not well known. That's, actually national security issues in Congress were discussing that. But that absolutely was a problem. You had companies that had a policy of just-in-time delivery. That means only having so much on hand for what they thought that they would need, not really having enough on the back lot that in the event that they had distribution challenges, that the plants would stay running in a deep freeze that would go on for 2-3 weeks and have all this demand on the grid. Mr. Murray, in my opinion, because of the tentative situations with First Energy Solutions, obviously with those plants now, they went through bankruptcy. They're only going to purchase enough coal to have on hand for minimal operations. We're still in a tenuous situation because of all this. And again, it's due to FERC. It's due to this political back and forth by the various entities, like you said, Bloomberg and some of the environmentalists and Beyond Coal people. What they're saying constantly in a war on words on this has put us all. I think I've got some concerns, quite honestly, as an Ohioan looking at it. Your thoughts?
I have genuine concerns. For 62 years, I've been selling coal to electric utilities. I know the electric power grid and the reliability and the cost of electricity as well as any man alive. I've outlived generations of CEOs of electric utilities. We have a crisis coming. In that one little cold snap, and we had a mild winter, 22 people died. If we get a real cold snap this winter, don't be alarmed if you're listening to this program, because I have been saying it for many years now. And by the way, to follow up on your point on the feckless FERC that does nothing, the nominee is McNamee, the guy that resigned, and good riddance was Robert Powelson of Pennsylvania. He went with the gas company. So, but I don't look for them to do anything. It's another bureaucracy, and they're not following the lead of our president, who gets it. He really does. But it's so frustrating to see all the rules against you. Subsidies for windmills and solar panels, it costs 7 times more.
Yes.
So, electric utility commissions of the various states paying more when they spend more. That needs to be changed in every state. You have the members of FERC that should act and oversee the grids. I was encouraged. Last week, I had some time with Andrew Watt, the president and CEO of the PJM Interconnection. That's 13 states, 65 million people.
Yes.
He knows he's got a problem in the grid.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
He acknowledged it. And he acknowledged it. And so did the man that runs the Midwest Independent System Operator grid. So there are at least 2 grids where the leadership sees that there is a security problem of reliability of supply, actually a cybersecurity problem. They have identified you could blow up pipelines in this country in just a few places and actually shut down all the natural gas generation. There aren't many that, if you really wanted to be sabotaged in this country, it's very vulnerable. There is a real security issue from the standpoint of having the grid at all and safety, let alone the fact that it is not competitive price-wise. So, and it isn't there if the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. So we have all these problems, but everybody says it's in the future. And I think about that man and woman or that single mom on fixed income paying out 31%, and I said, hey, the future's now. We've already closed 1 power plant, coal-fired, too many. We have a crisis. The world, the electric use between now and 40 is to increase 2.5% a year around the world. We're selling our coal now that we should be putting into power plants in the United States to generate 4 cents a kilowatt electricity. I'm jumping 30 million tons of 76 million tons all over the world to fuel power plants in other countries so their power supplies are reliable and low cost. This is Europe. They already went the Obama way. They already went the Democrat way and closed down their power plants. Now they're building them. They've already gone through the cycle.
Yes.
But our Democrats in this country don't see it. And people like Bloomberg, they're causing a lot of trouble with their alarmism. Albert Gore. They're more damage to this country than you can imagine. In the schools now, they preach climate change and global warming, all these disasters. These storms have been proven by the atmospheric scientists. They don't come from global warming. The reason they have the fires in California they're blowing is because they didn't cut the brush back. They did it for years. And the poor administrators in California let the brush grow. They didn't do forest management, so when they get a fire, it spreads. What they're supposed to do is keep that cleared out, and so if there is a fire, you've got the tough bark of the trees that are grown to be resistant to fires.
Right.
But that's not what's burning the trees. It's the brush underneath the trees that they won't clear out. But they want to blame global warming. They want to raise your electric rates more, and they're already paying 3 times more in California. It's absolutely a disaster at what they're getting away with here. And until my last breath, I'm going to fight this because I care about America. I grew up poor, just like you, Jim. And I know what a dollar is. My dad was paralyzed from the neck down when I was 9 years old. He lived that way 21 years. Mom and I were on our own. And I know that the average listener on your program does not realize how bad our politics is on this subject.
Yes.
But low-cost, reliable electricity is a staple of life. We cannot afford to have deaths. We cannot afford to have the power go off on the operating table. And we've got to keep fighting back, and that's what keeps me going. My Lord Jesus Christ tells me, don't stop. I'm going to use you to the end. I do know what I'm talking about. I'm expert on the subject, and unfortunately, money drives it. We have to change and incent utilities, incent families to preserve low-cost electricity, and that has been laid out for all the government people and all the grids to show them how it can be done. And that's what we tried to do, the President tried to do, and Secretary Perry. It's not gone away. The Bloomberg papers and the New York Times quoted me last week as saying, I'm losing, and they try to go. I said, I didn't say that. We're not going to go away.
That's
because
right.
We're right. And but they wish we would, because it's become a religion and a false religion, and it's teaching our children the wrong things. And it'll be too late this time, because we had 22 people die early this year, and it wasn't even a bad cold snap.
Well, the electric grid is vital to this country and to its economy, to our lifestyle, and actually, to how we live. And in the depth of winter in the northern regions, we can't live without it. And it just it's a national security issue. Well, we've run out of time, gentlemen. I want to wish you both a Merry Christmas. God bless you both and the great work you're doing. Jim, we're going to get the word out on Capitol Hill and through our networks of the seniors groups and also the Ohio Christian Alliance and our family groups about this issue. If you missed any part of this program, please go to our website at ohioca.org and you can hear it in its completion. Mr. Murray, thank you so much for joining us today. God bless you, my friend.
And to you, sir.
Thank you, Jim, and God bless you as well, and Merry Christmas to you both.
Same to you, and stay healthy, both of you. We need you.
Absolutely, and we'll be praying for our president and praying for our country as we go into this Advent season. Thank you all.
Your host, Chris Long, president of the Ohio Christian Alliance. To learn more about the issues that matter most to you and your family, visit online at ohioca.org. That's ohioca.org. Thank you for listening. This program is sponsored by the Ohio Christian Alliance of Akron, Ohio.